Welcome to this Houdini off-the-shelf tutorial where you will learn how to work quickly and creatively using Houdini's interactive tools. In this lesson, you will use the Cloud Rig tool to create both a hero cloud and a cloudscape. This tool uses OpenVDB to set up, display, and render out CloudFX in Houdini. Let's start by creating a hero cloud from a simple box, then add fluffiness to achieve a more organic look and feel. Here's a fresh Houdini scene, which we can use to build up the cloud from scratch. Grabbing the box tool, we can bring that into the scene, press enter to place it at the origin. We're going to take the z-axis and multiply by 2 to elongate the box a little bit, and we're going to translate that up, let's say about 4 units into the sky, just so that we can have it floating there when we set up the cloud. Now, with this cloud selected, let's make sure we have that selected, we can now go to the Cloud tab, and we're going to take the first one called the Cloud Rig. I'll explain the other 3 in a second. Click on that. We're going to see our box turned into a cloud shape. Now, in addition to the cloud, we also get things like the sunlight, the skylight. Also, you'll see that our box has been hidden, and the cloud is in a new network, which references the original cloud object from before. So in actual fact, we can take that original cloud object and move it up or down if we wanted to change what it looks like. So you'll also see that we've also got a bit of a background image here as part of our environment, which we can use to our advantage to set up. Let's just focus on the sky right now, and we can work with that. Now, the Cloud Rig tool, basically what it does is if we double click on this cloud, we get a small network here which includes a bunch of nodes, including the cloud node, cloud noise, and cloud light. Now you'll see those correspond to the other 3 tools we have here. So those can be assigned independently to objects, but obviously the Cloud Rig gives you a little bit of everything, so it's a good place to start and learn how to set these things up. Now the general role of the different parts that we have is the source is basically the importing of the box into the scene. The next one is the cloud tool, which converts that into a volume. By default, it basically the volume is a mimic of the shape itself. So if you've modeled a very specific shape, then by default this cloud tool will try to make a cloud out of that shape. Then there's the application of some noise to fluff it up a little bit, and we'll learn how to tinker with that a little bit. And then the cloud light basically scatters points in there to create a more cloud light illumination that supports what's going to happen later when you render it. Now, of course, chances are we don't want a cloud that looks like a box. So obviously one option would be to go off and model something that looks more like a cloud, and then we could apply the tool to that. But there are some options within the cloud node that allow us to do it a little bit differently. We can, for instance, well, first what we want to do is we want to change the sampling. Let's add a little bit of density into this, just so that we get a little bit more volume in there, see a little more puffiness there. We're going to go to the Scatter Shapes tab here, and what we're going to do is instead of relying on a direct representation of the shape, we're going to fill the shape with some pieces. And what you see is we get a much puffier look. Now if we click on this display-wise, you'll see this is generally what the look is, and we can play with various parameters here to multiply how many of these points we have. We can change the shape of the sizes. Obviously that's a little too big. We can it's just these numbers are all a little bit too big, so 0.3 would be a number, 0.1 might be a number, and you see how that gets us different shapes that we can do. We also have a random seed, so you can continue to sort of puff around here until you get oh, that's the one I like there. Now that, of course, will later have the noise applied, which adds the other sort of level of detail into that, and then you have the cloud light. So we can change parameters on here and have it feed through the whole pipeline. I just wanted to show you what that cloud node did. So in this case here, what's nice is instead of having to model a more complex shape for my cloud, I can actually just take a simpler shape like this and then get a result that looks cloud-like out of it. Good for a hero cloud like this. Now, if we want to smooth things a little bit, we can actually increase the smoothing in there a little bit. And what we're going to do next is we're going to go to the density tab. Now, just start playing around, you can sort of tighten up the density a little bit like this, and it gives us a softer look at the outer bounds. We can also go into the scatter shape and begin to add in what we call the secondary shapes. So these are sort of little secondary puffs that are going to go around the outside. And if we go back to the display node here, you can sort of see them sort of attached onto here. And of course we can do more of them. We can 300, sort of increase those, get more. We can also bump up the iterations, maybe bump that up to 10. So these are ways of adding a little bit more shape and puffiness to the cloud that we're working with. We also have an interesting option here called flatten. Now we put our guy up around 4, so that'll put the origin back up in the middle of the cloud. And then we can do things like, let's say, type in 0.5 at the bottom, and what it does is start to flatten off the bottom of that. You can also flatten off the top. So you can go quite deep with that if you want to flatten that out. So these are also options for shaping the cloud, so you can have a much more puffiness up at the top and a little flatter down the bottom, or vice versa, whatever it is that you need. Now let's go back to the Cloud Noise tab. This one here is where it all starts to get a little more organic in its look. Let's look at the parameters for that. We can sort of bump that up with an amplitude of, let's say, 0.15, go a little bit puffier there, and you can play with things like the octaves in terms of scaling that up. As you can see, we're getting a sort of layering of noise and effect onto our cloud. There's also the advection option, and we can play around with that. Let's say play around with the amplitude of 0.3, and that's how the noise is affected through there. And that these are all subtle little changes, but they can be used as you're sculpting and defining the shape of what you're working with. Now the Cloud Light node, which is this one here at the end, this one here is affects the look of the cloud in the screen. Now, one of the things that's important, I should have probably mentioned this before, in order to get the clouds, because they tend to get really blown out, and therefore you want to maintain a certain amount of detail, it's very important to use a linear workflow for this. So if we go to our color settings here, you'll notice we have what's called color correction, and I currently have a gamma set of 2.2. If you're doing any pyro effects or any rendering for that matter in Houdini, it's a good idea to have your gamma set to 2.2, and you can apply that just to the interactive renders, just to the render viewports, or you can also have it to the 3D viewport. Now, because we're pre-visualizing a lot here in the viewport, I've got it applied to all of those things just to make sure that that we're working. By having a 2.2 there, we're going to be able to make evaluation, the proper decisions in terms of color and light, that will pump this through a linear workflow much more efficiently than if we allowed things to be darker and the colors mushed together a little bit more. Now, on the Cloud Light node, you've got controls here for light, color. Now, there's also on the material palette a cloud shader here, and you can actually do some edits in here. Although in this particular case, this particular node seems to have more effect on things. So, for instance, if you wanted to put a blue light in, and maybe tone that down, maybe lighten it up, put a bit more blue in. If you want to put a little bit of blue or whatever in the light, you could sort of add that in here. So you've got control over the lighting and look of your cloud here in the scene. And you can also play with the intensity. You can increase the intensity and burn that out a little bit, or lighten it up and give a sort of a darker, stormier sort of cloud look. So that's an option there as well. So you've got a number of different controls that you have right here within the geometry network that allow you to find the ultimate look of the clouds that you're working with. Now, it'd be nice to render this out a little bit and see what it's going to look like from a rendering point of view. So we're going to add a new camera in. So this is what it's going to look like through the camera view. And we're going to go create a render node, mantra PBR. Now, we're not going to use this here. We're going to actually go to the render view, and we'll say, give me camera 1, give me mantra 1, and render. Now, when you first go to render with the PBR rendering in here, you'll notice it's very sort of noisy, and there's some settings. But as it goes through to the end, it starts to soften up, and we can get rid of that noise by playing with a few key parameters in here. The other thing is, if we go, we sort of lost that sky. If we actually go to the skylight here, we can render the light geometry, and that will bring that back in. So any environment light in Houdini, you can actually render that geometry using that option on the environment light. So let's go back to our outputs, select our mantra ROP, and we'll just tinker with a couple parameters in here that will affect how we do rendering. And sampling is the biggest place where this becomes an issue. You know, you can bump this up. Pixel samples, obviously, you can keep tinkering with that, and that will make things better, of course. For a final render, I might be inclined to go more about 7.7 or 8.8. But there's some other things that we can do to play with this as well. We can take this minimum here and bump it up to 3. This is going to help us. And there's also a volume quality, which is set quite low. For a higher quality, you're going to want to go maybe 0.5 or even higher, and you'll start to get a result. Now, if you don't want to see the pixelization in the middle, you see how it stays very sort of noisy as it goes through in here. The other option is to not do it in IPR world, but just sort of do these as rendering. So in this case, you see how it goes a little more quickly to the end result, and you see less of the noise. So it's less of a constant build-up and more of a let's get to the final product a little more quickly. So that's an option there. And if we were to, let's just pause that for a second, maybe take the volume quality up to 1, and maybe take that to 7, tab 7. So as you can see, to build up a hero cloud, like this one here, we're able to take a very simple shape like a box, fill that shape with a volume of puffy shapes that are very cloud-like, add layers of noise, and get it prepared for rendering like this in very quick order. Now for the next part of the lesson, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to create a cloudscape. First thing we're going to do is we're going to stop the rendering so that this whole render view does not kick in the next time we make a change, because as we switch back to the scene view, we don't want that to be rendering in the background as we make some edits. The other thing we'd like to do is let's save. We'll just put that to the desktop here, and we'll just call that Cloud Hero. And there we go. We have a hero cloud set up there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a cloudscape. Now, it would seem that the logical thing to do from what we've learned so far would be to let's distribute a bunch of boxes all over a grid, and then we'll just fill those up with volumes and we'll get our cloudscape. And while that's one way to approach it, it's actually not necessary. We can actually get the cloudscape we want simply by manipulating the parameters and the box that we have here already. So let's go and do that. So let's turn off the cloud for a second, and what we'll do is we'll go into this box, and in this case here we have a box of 1, 2, 1. So we're going to change that to say 80, 0.5, and 80. We've got this big box. Now let's lock that and just tumble around. Make sure we get that. Okay. Now we're going to turn that off, and we're going to turn our cloudscape back on. But of course, there's nothing showing right now, and the reason for that is that the settings that we have don't really work for this particular shape. So we're going to go back to the cloud node here, and we're going to go back to our volume, and I would be inclined to say that we need a much bigger size here. Let's go 300. So that'll help right there in terms of create a much bigger cloud. Now we're going to, now you see we're starting to get some stuff going on there. Now we're going to change our scatter shape size of the volumes to 0.6, so we're getting a much bigger sort of look there. And we're going to set the multiplier to 0.05, and this will give us something a little bit more that we can work with. Now, let's try that. Try 1.5, so maybe we multiply a little bit more in there. There we go. So we're getting the clouds like this. Now, we just let's lift up. There we go. There we go. Get a little more of a cloudscape there. We lock that. So now we've been able to take the clouds that we have and distribute them over a wider range of area. Now, and then if we go there and we go here, see, there we go, we have our cloudscape. So go back to smoothing. Let's go 1 in the smoothing area. I don't need as much smoothing for this kind of thing. And we've already done some flattening, which is helpful there. That still plays a role, and as you can see, you get sort of a different result if we do or do not flatten that. The flattening, I think, works well for this kind of cloud. The density, we can leave the way that is. Let's go look at our secondary shapes. And in this case here, our scatter points are good at about 300. Let's change our iterations to maybe more like 24. Just see how that affects things. This is going through a bit of cooking to get where we want. And we'll leave some of this other stuff there, but I mean, as you can see, at any point we can sort of randomly work on the seed of this. And of course, we can do that same thing with the fill source. So if we want to try different seeds in terms of the noise and just see how does that affect the result, you can sort of get the cloudscape that you want just by tinkering around with the values here in this view here. So we can get more of shape it the way that you want. Oh, that one's good. I like that one. Okay, so now we're going to go to the Cloud Noise tab. Now in this case, let's buff up the amplitude. This will just make everything a little bit puffier there. Change the... Oh, that was the... Sorry, that's not what I want to do. I actually want to do it here with the noise itself. Bump that up there. That gives us there, and our element size, we can bump that up as well. So we can start to really get the clouds, some detail into the clouds here. Of course, at any point, we might also go back here and look at the overall volume and just say, is this density working for us, or do we need some more density in there as a whole? So that's something we can also do. And it'll take a little longer to cook. So one option might be to just do that when you're a little more comfortable with the overall shape of that you're working with. Now, at this point, there's a lot of clouds there. So what we might want to do is just scatter the shapes. Maybe go back to 0.05 and just see if we can reduce the number of clouds, because all the noise and everything sort of puff those clouds out a little bit more. Maybe 0.75. Play around with that. Oh, that's definitely too much. How about I think I meant 0.035. We had originally talked about maybe scattering some points around the surface, and of course the advantage of that would be the fact that if you scattered points on a surface, you might have a little more control over where they are. So that certainly is an option. This is more of a sampling out different possibilities procedurally, and then sort of getting the thing that you want, and saying okay, that's where I want to be. So the advantage of doing it with this method that we're showing here is that you can try things out and explore things and get shapes that are organic and that have come out organically. Now, if we want to render this, let's go back to the render view. Now, in this case here, what I'm going to do is just go to my output node. Now, because we're still testing things at this point, let's just knock some of these numbers back down. Volume quality, pixel samples. Let's change to camera number 1, and we can say render. We'll get the scene from here. So as you can see, a nice collection of puffy clouds that you can work with. Obviously, we'd need to increase the values to get some of the noise out of here. Well, I hope this lesson has given you a good introduction to what the Cloud Rig tool can do for you in Houdini, how it can be used to create both hero clouds and cloudscapes, and some of the parameters you need to adjust along the way to get the perfect look.